President-elect Biden continues his focus on the economic crisis and is set to meet with workers and small business owners today. And it comes as a bipartisan group of senators unveiled their plans on how to come together to give Americans some much-needed aid. So for more on the latest on the Biden transition, let's bring in Ed O'Keefe. So, Ed, Biden campaigned on a platform partially that he would be able to bring both sides together. He has long-standing relationships with many of those on Capitol Hill. What influence is he having on lawmakers in the effort to strike some sort of bipartisan agreement for COVID-19 relief?
That's unclear, Anne-Marie. When this agreement was announced yesterday among Democratic and Republican senators, about a dozen of them and then a handful of members from the House, I reached out to one of the aides. I said, have you all brought this up yet with the president-elect or the vice president-elect? And this aide, who would know, said, I'll get back to you if and when we're going to do that. Haven't heard back, which should give you a sense that their more immediate problem is convincing congressional leadership. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who both have signaled they have no interest in this, which means it's really not even worth bringing it to Biden. You heard him say yesterday he'd like to see Congress move on something by the end of this year, as they're trying to do, but that they better be prepared to do much more once he becomes president. There's an interview this morning in the New York Times he did with the columnist Tom Friedman where he says again he'd like to see the tax rate on wealthy Americans go back up to about 39.6%, wants to see large corporations paying at least some semblance of taxes into the system to help pay for the changes that are going to be needed to help revive the economy coming out of the pandemic. So we'll see whether or not he's able to generate any bipartisan accord himself from the sidelines here in Delaware. Otherwise, we will probably see some bigger push by him come January 20th and beyond. Notably, in that interview with Tom Friedman, says again, reiterates what he said yesterday as well, hasn't talked to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and is sort of tiptoeing and tap dancing around the issue because he's trying to maintain the ability to talk to him at some point and not necessarily box in McConnell. It's a guy who doesn't like to be, and he understands, the president-elect does, the sensitivities right now, given, and we'll say this every day in every way, Anne-Marie, that a lot of things in Washington right now depend on what Georgia voters decide to do on January 5th with those two Senate special elections.
Yeah, that's always a good reminder. Speaking of that bipartisan group of senators that gathered, you're right, we didn't see any leadership there yesterday, but what is the proposal that they're floating?
So it's about a $900 billion and change deal that would provide relief to cities and states, which is one of the top concerns right now. Mayors and governors saying we need help because cities and states have to balance their budgets, even if the federal government does not. And they're going to need relief for everything from paying for hospitals, paying for police and EMS workers, trying to keep public transportation systems operating to make sure that people who have to get to work can still do so during this pandemic. There would be a revival of the Paycheck Protection Program. There would be an extension of unemployment benefits, among other things. The problem for some is this is too big. The problem for others is that this is too small. But the idea here was to bring together a bunch of moderate Democrats and Republicans who have a penchant for deal-making, try to present something that could work, and see if there's interest. But the problem on Capitol Hill is unless you have buy-in from top leadership, the Speaker or the Majority Leader, most of what you're trying to do won't go anywhere. What they're presenting, what they're trying to do is a bit old school. It's the way it used to work. But we live in a top-down congressional society right now, where if you don't have the buy-in from them, it's very unlikely something's going to work.
So the president-elect officially introduced his top economic advisors yesterday. They still have to be confirmed by the Senate. No real surprises there. It was all what we had expected. You sort of highlighted part of what his plan is in terms of the economy. But his nominee for the Office of Management and Budget, Neera Tannenbaum, she's received a lot of criticism from both Republicans, but also members of the more left-leaning side of the Democratic Party. The Biden's also getting pressure to appoint more women, more individuals of color. I'm wondering just how the team is kind of navigating these pressures that are coming at them.
Yeah, again, in that Friedman interview today, the president-elect acknowledges that it looks like there's going to be a little bit of a fight over Tandon. It was interesting yesterday to hear her try to personalize her own experiences with federal assistance to try to give people a sense that if she is indeed nominated and confirmed to be White House Budget Director, she's going to have a keen understanding of what happens once a budget is written and implemented across the country. She pointed out that in the Boston suburbs as a kid, her mother, for a while, a single mother, relied on federally subsidized housing and food stamps to help boost her family. So she says, I understand budget priorities because I've been one, and want to see the government continue to provide relief to people who need it. But there are Republicans who are not big fans of hers because of things she has said, mostly, over the last several years, to which Democrats are turning around and saying, if you've got an issue with what she's been saying, let me introduce you to President Trump and things he's been saying over the last few years. A bit hypocritical of you Republicans to be concerned about this. Beyond that, the transition team is anticipating there will be some squabbling to some extent over perhaps Secretary of State Antony Blinken, the nominee, or the nominee to be Secretary of State, just given some of the private sector work he's done in the years since he left the Obama administration. But beyond him and Tannen, so far at least, there's no real signal of Republican concern. And I think, again, part of the reason why there isn't necessarily a good sense of that yet is, let's say it again, Georgia. Those races will determine the balance of power in the Senate. If Democrats win both, we get to a 50-50 chamber. If Republicans win even one, they get control, they'll run the committees, and they'll get to decide if and when hearings are held.
All right, we might hear a lot more from them. Ed, thank you so much.